My name is Erin Valdez, and I'm 35 years old. If you walked into my sister's house last year during Thanksgiving weekend, you probably wouldn't have even noticed me. I'd be the one in the kitchen rinsing dishes, chasing after kids who weren't mine, or folding laundry in a room with a creaky twin bed, a flickering lamp, and no closet. That room, the one with the draft and the floral comforter from 2003, that's where I slept. They called it the guest room, but it had quietly become my bedroom, my home, without ever really being mine. Before I share how everything changed, do me a quick favor. Comment where you're watching from, subscribe to the channel, and hit the like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Because this is the story of how I went from just the babysitter to the one holding the deed. But back then, I was the silent one, the helper, the extra set of hands. 3 years ago, after my sister's second child was born, I moved into her suburban house just for a few weeks to help with the newborn. That's how it started. She'd had a difficult delivery, her husband was working overtime, and they were overwhelmed. I had just left my job at a marketing firm after a burnout that nearly put me in the hospital. I thought the break would help me recalibrate. A few weeks of quiet, of helping with diapers and night feeds, and then I'd get back on my feet. Weeks became months, months became years. It's funny how quickly a temporary favor becomes a permanent role when you stop asking for anything in return. They didn't charge me rent, sure, but they didn't pay me either. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being Aunt Erin and became, "Can you watch the kids while we run out, Erin?" Or, "Can you stay home and wait for the plumber, Erin?" I ate alone most nights after they'd already had dinner. I did school pickups, grocery runs, cleaned up vomit, and once even stayed up all night making a volcano out of papier-mâché for my nephew's science fair project. My name wasn't on the paperwork, but I felt like part of the foundation of that household, silent, invisible, and holding everything up. They had rules, of course. I was welcome to stay, as long as I didn't bring guests over. I was welcome to use the car if I filled the tank. I was part of the family, but not quite. They loved to remind me how generous they were for letting me live in their house. Sometimes I'd hear my sister on the phone. "Yeah, Erin's still with us. She's kind of our live-in babysitter at this point," followed by laughter, like I was some quirky, unemployed cousin who just never moved out. She never said it with malice, but it still cut deep. It wasn't just the space I lived in that was borrowed, it was the life I was living. I had stopped painting, stopped reading, stopped building anything that belonged to me. The only thing that was mine anymore was my laptop. And even that I kept tucked away under my bed when I wasn't using it. That laptop, though, that was the seed of something bigger. Every night, after they'd all gone to bed, I opened it and worked. At first, it was small, a few digital templates I uploaded to Etsy, some ebooks on home organization, and a quiet little YouTube channel about minimalist living. I didn't tell anyone, especially not my sister. I didn't want the eye rolls, the "you still doing that little online thing" comments. I worked in silence. I studied SEO while the kids watched cartoons. I built a brand while folding socks. I answered customer emails from the laundry room, and slowly, something started to grow. Orders trickled in, views climbed, sponsors reached out. And one day, a publishing company emailed me about turning my 10-minute tidy ebook into a print release. That night, I sat in the dark guest room and cried. Not because of the opportunity, but because I realized how far I had gone without anyone ever noticing. They still saw me as the babysitter, the helper, the one who didn't have a plan, and I had let them. I had become so used to shrinking myself to fit into their world that I forgot how big mine had the potential to be. I didn't want revenge, I wanted recognition. But more than anything, I wanted space. Not just physical space, but emotional space to breathe, to expand, to finally live like I mattered. And that's when something happened that changed everything. Something that would shift the entire dynamic, not just in the house, but in my heart. But before I tell you what happened, before the letter arrived, before the screaming in the kitchen, before my sister's face turned pale when she realized the truth, you need to understand how much I sacrificed to stay invisible, because only when you know how small I was willing to become, can you understand what it meant when I finally stood up and told them the house they were living in? It belonged to me. But that moment, that reveal, that's still coming. For now, I want you to remember this. I slept in the guest room. I stayed quiet. I said thank you every time they let me exist in their space. And they never, not once, thought to ask how I was really doing. But they would. Soon. When people ask how I ended up living in my sister's guest room, I usually give them the polished, comfortable version of the story. Oh, I just came to help after her second baby. You know how chaotic newborn life is. I say it with a soft smile, like it was a short-term choice, like I wasn't slowly being erased in plain sight. But the truth is more complicated, and a little uglier. 3 years ago, I was living in Chicago, working as a brand strategist at a creative agency. The job was high pressure, long hours, tight deadlines, but I was good at it. I didn't love it, but it gave me security. A downtown apartment, health insurance, a fridge full of overpriced smoothies and oat milk I rarely drank. Then, in the span of 2 months, everything cracked open. First, my mom died suddenly. A heart attack while she was putting dishes away. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. Just silence. That loss wrecked me in ways I couldn't process at the time. Mom was our glue, the one who kept my sister Megan and me from drifting too far apart. Without her, the distance between us grew fast. Then Megan got pregnant with her second child, and it was a rough pregnancy. Her husband Jason was working long hours at his tech job, and their toddler was already a handful. She started calling more often, asking questions that weren't really questions. "Do you think you could come for a bit? Just a couple weeks to help out?" I was drowning in grief, burned out from work, tired of being alone in a city that never stopped moving. So I said yes. I packed 2 suitcases, left my lease early, and flew back to California. 2 weeks turned into 2 months. I cooked, cleaned, took their toddler to daycare, sat with Megan through back pain and sleepless nights. I told myself I was being a good sister. I told myself it was temporary. But then the baby came, and Jason got a promotion, and Megan's recovery was slower than expected. Every time I mentioned going back, she'd say, "Just a little longer. We need you right now." Need. That word held so much weight. It had been used against me my whole life. "You're so good in a crisis, Erin. You're just the calm one, the helper. You're great with kids. You're like a second mom." Compliments that felt more like assignments. By month 4, I'd quietly moved into the guest room permanently. My boxes were unpacked. My clothes shared space with Christmas decorations in the hallway closet. My mail was being forwarded, but no one ever talked about it. I was just there, invisible and indispensable. Jason would nod at me in the mornings as I handed him his travel mug. Megan would hand off the baby without saying thank you, and I'd spend hours with the kids, cooking dinner, doing dishes, refilling the diaper drawer. No paycheck, no boundaries, no time off. But I told myself I was lucky. I had a roof over my head. I wasn't paying rent. I wasn't stuck in a cubicle anymore. I convinced myself this was rest. Except I wasn't resting. I was eroding. There were moments when I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. Hair always tied up, dark circles under my eyes, wearing the same stretched-out hoodie day after day. Megan started introducing me to guests as our live-in babysitter, always with a laugh. Jason joked that I was like furniture now, always there. Once during a dinner with some of their friends, someone asked what I did for a living. Megan cut in before I could answer. "She's figuring it out," she said cheerfully, pouring more wine. "She's in transition." I wanted to scream, but I just smiled, like always. That night, I stared at the ceiling fan in the guest room and asked myself a question I had avoided for months. Is this what your life is now? And I didn't have an answer, but something shifted that night. I opened my laptop, which had sat untouched under my bed for weeks. It was dusty, forgotten, like the version of me who once used it daily. I started small. I wrote out a list of everything I was good at: organization, branding, writing, strategy. I took an online course at night while the kids were sleeping, learned about digital products, passive income, marketing funnels, Etsy storefronts. Then I launched my first product, a printable family meal planner with a clean, minimalist design. I sold 1 copy the first week, then 2, then 10. I wasn't making much, a few dollars here and there, but it was mine. I built a brand called Clear with Claire, a play on my name, though I used a pseudonym for privacy. Digital planners, cleaning routines, video tutorials on organizing chaos. Funny, right? I was living in other people's chaos and monetizing it. But no one in the house knew. I worked from the laundry room, filming videos at midnight with the dryer humming beside me. It became my sanctuary. The guest room still had peeling wallpaper and a broken dresser drawer, but I was rebuilding something inside myself, quietly, carefully. One night, as I was editing a PDF for my Tidy Tiny Spaces guide, I overheard Megan on the phone with a friend in the next room. "Oh, Erin? She's still here," she said, voice breezy. "She's kind of our built-in helper. It works out. She doesn't really have anywhere else to go right now." That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. Not because it was entirely untrue, but because of how comfortable she was saying it out loud, and how little I had done to correct it. I let them define me as someone with nowhere else to go, while building something incredible right under their roof. But even then, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Not until the day I found the envelope in the recycling bin. The envelope that had Jason's name on it. The envelope that said, "Notice of default. Foreclosure pending." And that was the moment I realized the house I was living in was about to go up for sale. And they had no idea I was about to be their buyer. When I first started my digital business, I didn't even call it a business. I called it a side thing, a project, or, when I was feeling especially cautious, just an idea I'm exploring. Not because I wasn't serious about it, but because I already knew no one in that house would take it seriously. Jason worked in tech, and Megan had a degree in finance she never really used, but she loved throwing around phrases like return on investment or market volatility whenever I mentioned doing anything that didn't involve a salary and a boss. So when I quietly launched my Etsy shop with 3 simple products, a weekly planner, a meal prep system, and a decluttering checklist, I didn't tell them. Not out of secrecy, but out of self-preservation. They'd laugh. Not in a cruel way, but in that dismissive, amused way people laugh when they think you're cute for trying. "You're doing that printable thing again? That's adorable, Erin. Hey, maybe it'll go viral. Wow, you sold 6 planners? Don't spend it all in one place." Those weren't imaginary voices. They were real. I'd heard versions of them before, anytime I dared to pursue something that wasn't packaged in corporate respectability. So I kept my work hidden. Every night, after putting the kids to bed, I'd tiptoe into the laundry room, my makeshift office, and open my laptop. A wooden folding table held my mouse, my notebook, and a single desk lamp I'd bought for $7 at Goodwill. The washer would rattle beside me. Sometimes a toy would fall out of the dryer. But it was the only space that was mine. And in that little corner, I built something no one else could see. By month 4, my little shop had reached $1,000 in sales, then $3,500. I remember the moment it hit $10,000. I was alone in the guest room, sitting cross-legged on the bed, staring at the screen like it might disappear. That number wasn't just income, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't just figuring things out. Proof that I had value outside of diapers and dishes. Proof that I still knew how to build something. But when I mentioned that I might be saving up to move out, Megan got weirdly quiet. Move where? She asked, blinking. I thought you were happy here. I smiled and said I was just exploring options. She nodded, but her eyes said something else. Fear, maybe? Or disbelief. She didn't ask about it again. The truth was, I'd been planning my exit for months. Not because I didn't love the kids. I did, with my whole heart. But because I'd finally realized that staying meant shrinking. And I was done shrinking. Then came the envelope, the one from the bank. It was half crumpled, tossed in the blue recycling bin beside the fridge. I pulled it out, curious, and nearly dropped it when I read the words, Notice of Default, Foreclosure Pending. Jason's name, their address. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then I dug deeper. Their mortgage was underwater. Jason had made some risky investments, crypto maybe, or something worse. Megan had no idea. She thought his promotion meant more money. She was still shopping like they were fine, but they were anything but fine. I remember sitting in the backyard that afternoon while the kids played in the inflatable pool. The sun was blazing, but I felt cold, because suddenly everything made sense. The tension between them, the way Jason flinched when mail arrived, the nervous energy in the house. They were drowning, and they hadn't told me, not because they didn't trust me, but because they didn't see me as someone who needed to know. I was just the helper, the background character. So I made a decision. I called my friend Allison, a real estate attorney I'd worked with in my agency years ago. If a property's heading to foreclosure, I asked her, is there any way to buy it, quietly? She hesitated. You want to buy it before it hits public auction? Yes. Can you afford that? I looked at my Stripe dashboard, my Shopify analytics, and my 3 separate business bank accounts. I can. My business had exploded in the last year. A viral TikTok about my 1-minute reset rule brought in thousands of new customers. I had 3 virtual assistants, a licensing deal with a stationery brand, and a digital course that sold out every time I launched it. And all of it had happened while I was making peanut butter sandwiches and folding laundry. I submitted an offer through a shell company. All cash, quick close. I kept it anonymous. No one knew it was me. The deal was approved in under 3 weeks. Just like that, the house I had lived in, but never belonged to, became mine. But I didn't say anything, not yet. Because part of me still hoped they'd change, that they'd say thank you one day, that they'd ask how I was doing, that Megan would stop introducing me as our live-in help, and maybe say something real. She didn't. Instead, she told me, 3 days after I closed on the house, that she and Jason were going to rent out the guest room once things settled. We could use the extra income, she said breezily. You'll be fine, right? That was the moment I knew. They didn't just not see me. They saw me as disposable. I went back to the guest room, closed the door, and took a deep breath. Then I picked up my phone. Allison, I said, I need to draft a letter. One that makes it very clear. This house isn't theirs anymore. And that's how the countdown began. 60 days. 60 days until everything they thought they owned vanished. The deed arrived in a plain envelope, no bigger than a greeting card. No dramatic stamp, no embossed logo. Just a white rectangle slipped quietly into the mailbox, as if it didn't hold the truth that would soon flip this house, and everyone in it, inside out. It was a strange thing to hold proof of ownership in my hands. My name, or rather the name of the LLC I'd created, typed neatly on that piece of paper. Ownership of the entire property, front yard to back fence, mine. I sat on the edge of the guest room bed, the one with the bent frame and the lumpy mattress, and ran my fingers over the paper. I expected to feel triumphant, maybe even smug, but mostly I just felt hollow. This wasn't the dream I had grown up imagining. I used to think homeownership would come with a golden key and a bottle of champagne, some version of standing barefoot in your first kitchen while laughing with someone you love. Instead, I was staring at peeling paint and wondering how I had arrived at a point in life where I needed a legal document just to prove I belonged somewhere. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I also didn't want to keep being invisible. The plan was simple. I'd wait a few weeks, give them time to stabilize, then send the letter. A formal notice, clear, direct, legally sound. 60 days to vacate or renegotiate under my terms. I wasn't going to kick them out immediately. I wasn't cruel. I just wanted the truth on the table. But life, as always, didn't wait. 2 days after the deed arrived, Megan came home from a spa weekend with her friends. She walked into the kitchen where I was unloading groceries and said casually, "Oh, by the way, Jason and I decided to list the guest room on Airbnb." I turned slowly, still holding a carton of eggs. "What?" "The guest room," she repeated, tossing her keys into a ceramic dish by the sink. "We could use the money. We're behind on some things. It's just sitting there and we figured, you're not really doing much right now, right?" She said it like I was furniture, like I wasn't a person, like I didn't matter. "Where would I sleep?" I asked, my voice calm but flat. She blinked, genuinely confused. "Well, you could take the couch maybe, or we could figure something out short term. It's not personal, Aaron. We're just trying to make ends meet." My jaw clenched. Not personal. Of course not. I was just a name on their invisible staff list, the unpaid nanny, the night shift dishwasher, the one who somehow always made herself smaller so everyone else could stretch out. I didn't say anything. I just nodded slowly, finished putting the eggs away, and walked back to the guest room. That night, I wrote the letter. It wasn't angry, it wasn't cruel, it was professional. Simple. 1 page. It informed Megan and Jason that as of the following month, the property would undergo transfer of management. They were to vacate the premises within 60 days unless they wished to sign a formal lease, one that I would draft with rent based on current market value. No more helping out, no more free ride. The letter was signed with the name of the holding company. No mention of me, not yet. I printed it on thick paper and slid it into an envelope. And then I waited. 3 days passed. On the morning of the 4th, I placed the envelope on the kitchen island before heading out for a walk. I didn't go far, just down the street and back. Enough time for the letter to be found. When I returned, I knew immediately that it had been opened. The house was silent. No cartoons playing, no music from Megan's Bluetooth speaker. Just the kind of stillness that settles before a storm. Jason was in the living room, holding the letter like it was radioactive. Megan was beside him, barefoot, a half-full coffee mug shaking in her hand. "You know something about this?" Jason asked, voice tight. I met his eyes and nodded. "Yes, I wrote it." Megan blinked like she hadn't heard me correctly. "Wait, what do you mean you wrote it?" I walked into the room and sat down in the armchair across from them, the same chair I used to fold laundry in for hours. "I bought the house," I said simply, "through an LLC. I've been watching the foreclosure process since the first notice arrived. I made an offer. It was accepted. The house belongs to me now." Silence. It stretched for a full 15 seconds, long enough for the hum of the refrigerator to become unbearably loud. "You're joking," Jason said finally. "This is a joke." "It's not," I replied. "I'm the legal owner. The deed is in my name." Megan's voice was a whisper. Why would you do that?" My laugh came out bitter and sharp. "Why? Because no one told me you were losing the house. Because you've let me live here for 3 years as if I didn't exist. Because I have cooked your meals, raised your kids, and cleaned your floors. And you were about to throw me onto the couch so you could host strangers for extra cash." Megan's face flushed. "You could have told us." "You never asked," I said. "You never once asked what I was building, how I was doing, what I was worth. You just assumed I had nothing because I wasn't talking about it." Jason shook his head. "This is betrayal." "No," I said softly. "This is consequence." Megan opened her mouth. but I stood up before she could speak. "I'm giving you 60 days," I said. "You can stay, but under a lease, or you can go." And with that, I walked back to the guest room, my guest room, and closed the door. For the first time, the silence wasn't mine to hold. It belonged to them.
I didn't expect them to invite me to Thanksgiving after everything, but they did. 2 weeks had passed since I told them the truth. 2 weeks of cold silences, doors shutting harder than necessary, and tiptoed conversations that stopped the second I entered a room. I gave them space. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Then, out of nowhere, Megan knocked on the guest room door one afternoon. She didn't open it, just stood on the other side like a ghost of the version of her I used to admire. "We're still doing Thanksgiving dinner," she said. "You can come, if you want." There was no warmth in her voice, no apology, just a begrudging olive branch. I waited a beat before replying. "Thanks." That was it. No more words were exchanged. I considered not going. I had every right to skip it, to pack a bag and spend the holiday somewhere that didn't reek of tension and turkey. But something in me wanted to face it, to sit at that table, in that house, and finally see things clearly.
So I stayed. On Thanksgiving morning, the house buzzed with forced cheer. Megan was in the kitchen early, wearing an apron that said, "Thankful and blessed." The irony stung. Jason moved through the halls like a man walking on cracked glass, each step quieter than the last. I stayed out of the way. I offered to help once. Megan shook her head. "We've got it." So I retreated to the guest room and took my time getting ready. I didn't wear anything flashy, just a soft maroon sweater, jeans, and a pair of ankle boots I'd bought with the first payment I ever received from my business. They still made me feel powerful, like armor. The guests started arriving around 3. Megan had invited a handful of neighbors, Jason's sister and her kids, and even our distant cousin Leah, who hadn't been seen since 2017. No one said anything about the seating arrangements, but I noticed there were only 10 chairs at the main table. I wasn't one of them.
A small folding table had been set up in the corner of the dining room. It was covered in a plastic tablecloth with fall leaves printed on it. There were 2 chairs, a bottle of sparkling apple cider, paper napkins, the kids' table, and I had been placed there. No name card. Just an empty chair beside an 8-year-old who spilled mashed potatoes on his shirt and asked me if I still lived in the laundry room. I laughed softly, but inside, something twisted. Megan made no attempt to include me in the adult conversation. Jason's sister talked loudly about her recent ski trip. The neighbor couple bragged about their new Tesla. Leah recounted her latest yoga retreat in Sedona. It was like watching a play I'd seen 100 times. Same lines, same characters, same hollow applause. I tried to focus on the food. To her credit, Megan had outdone herself. The turkey was golden and crisp. The stuffing was spiced perfectly. There were at least 12 sides. It was a feast, and not one person asked me how I was doing. Not one asked where I'd been, or what I'd built, or how it felt to go from ghost to property owner. Instead, halfway through dinner, someone made a joke about corporate landlords and how people with money ruin everything. Jason laughed. Megan did too. I didn't. It was near the end of the meal, right before dessert, when things finally snapped. One of the neighbor women, a woman I'd never met before in my life, turned to Megan and said, "And who's this? Your cousin?" Megan smiled, tight. "No, this is Erin. Well, she helps out. She's been staying with us." Helps out. Like I was some part-time housekeeper who wandered in from the cold. I felt the heat rising in my chest. I placed my fork down gently and stood up. "Actually," I said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "I'm Erin, Megan's sister, and I don't just help out." The room froze. Every face turned toward me, a few mouths still full of sweet potato casserole. Even the kid beside me stopped mid-chew. "I'm also," I continued, "the legal owner of this house." A beat. Then Jason cleared his throat. That's not... It is, I said calmly. I purchased the house last month through a holding company. The deed's in my name. Ask your lawyer. Megan stood abruptly, knocking her chair back a few inches. Aaron, this isn't the time. Actually, I said, I think it's exactly the time. Since I wasn't given a real seat at the table, I thought I'd at least earn the right to speak. I looked around at the stunned faces. For 3 years, I lived in this house, in that guest room, taking care of kids that weren't mine, folding laundry, cooking meals, and being treated like furniture. I was the helper, the babysitter, the one you could always count on but never really saw. No one spoke.
I could hear the turkey sizzling in its own fat on the kitchen counter, a slow drip from the faucet, the quiet scrape of someone nervously pushing a dish aside. And I did it, I continued, while quietly building a business that now supports me. That gave me the money to buy this house out from under foreclosure. That made me the person keeping this roof over your head. I looked at Megan. Her face had drained of color. You were about to kick me out for Airbnb guests, I said softly, while I was the one saving your home. Jason stepped forward, trying to regain control. Okay, enough. This is embarrassing. No, I said. What's embarrassing is how easily this entire room accepted the idea that I was just there, like background noise, like I didn't have value unless I was cleaning up after you. Megan finally spoke, her voice shaking. You blindsided us. You never asked, I said. That's the problem. None of you ever asked. And then I turned to leave. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I walked out into the cool November night, my boots clicking against the front steps. Behind me, I heard silence. Real silence. The kind that comes when people finally realize they were never the main character in someone else's story. I didn't go far after I left the house that night. Just around the block, past the maple trees already bare from the season, their limbs reaching like fingers into the black sky. My boots crunched against fallen leaves, the cold air cut at my cheeks, but it felt better than the silence in that dining room, the way they had looked at me like I was a stranger holding a knife. I wasn't angry, not really, not yet. I was something deeper, the kind of disappointment that settles in your chest and builds its own weight. Because despite everything I'd revealed, everything I'd said, part of me still hoped they'd come after me, that Megan would run out the door, that Jason would apologize, that someone would say, "We didn't know. We're sorry. We see you now." No one did. I sat on the porch swing across the street, Mrs. Holland's place. She was away with her grandchildren that weekend. I watched the lights in my house, glow through the windows. Inside, people were still seated, still eating dessert, still pretending. I was no longer the ghost in that house. I had taken shape, and that scared them more than anything. Eventually, I returned. Megan didn't look at me when I walked back in. Jason passed me in the hallway with a muttered, "Hey!" Leah had left. The neighbors were gone. The kids were upstairs. The house was back to quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was pressure. That was the night I knew nothing would go back to normal. Not because I didn't want it to, but because there was nothing normal to return to. The illusion had been shattered. The next morning, I came downstairs early as I always did. I still packed the kids' lunchboxes, still refilled the coffee pot. I didn't do it for Megan or Jason. I did it for the 2 little lives who still smiled at me every morning like nothing had changed. And for a few days, I let things sit. But the temperature in the house kept dropping, not outside, but between us. Every word was a test. Every moment felt like we were all waiting for someone to make the next move. The move came 5 days later. I was walking past the nursery when I heard Megan's voice behind the closed bedroom door. She was on the phone, pacing. "No, I don't know what we're going to do. She ambushed us. She's acting like she's better than everyone now, like we owe her something just because she bought the house." Pause. "She's still here, sleeping in the guest room like some queen. It's ridiculous. I gave her a place to live for years. She should be grateful. I didn't mean to listen, but I couldn't unhear it. She should be grateful. As if the countless meals, the emergency diaper runs, the midnight illnesses, the field trips, the birthday parties, as if none of it counted. As if I was lucky just to exist in her world. I backed away slowly, my hands shaking. Something snapped in me. Not loudly, not violently, quietly, precisely, like a lock turning. That night, I opened my laptop and contacted my lawyer again. No more lease offer, no more option to stay. I wanted to proceed with full eviction, legally clean, firm, unapologetic, 60 days, no negotiation. I wrote the final letter myself, this time with my own name at the bottom. No holding company, no signature from a firm. Just me, Erin Valdez, property owner, sister, former ghost. The next morning, I left the envelope on the kitchen table and went for a walk again. When I returned, the energy in the house had changed. Jason was sitting at the table, staring at the paper. Megan stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes red but dry. "You're really doing this?" she asked. Her voice was tired, not sad, just hollow. "Yes," I said, "I am. This is our home." "It was never yours legally," I replied, "and you knew that. You're evicting your own family." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally choosing myself." Jason muttered something under his breath and walked out of the room. Megan looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. "I just don't understand how you could do this, after everything." "You don't understand," I said, "because you never cared enough to ask." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The next few weeks were a blur of real estate agents, movers, and quiet, tension-filled mornings. Megan and Jason didn't speak to me unless they had to. The kids were confused. I answered their questions as gently as I could. I told them nothing bad was happening, just that I was going to make some changes. And that I loved them. Always. I still packed their lunches, still tied their shoelaces, still read bedtime stories when Megan forgot. Because they were innocent, and I wasn't leaving them with bitterness. But inside, I was burning something to the ground. The final night before they moved out, I sat on the floor of the guest room, my old cell, my old sanctuary, and stared at the blank wall. I whispered out loud, just to myself, "Never again." And I meant it. Never again would I live in someone else's shadow while they stood in the light I built. Never again would I shrink to fit inside someone's expectations. The next morning, they left. No goodbye, no thank you. Just the sound of suitcases rolling across the driveway and a front door that didn't close gently. I stood by the window as the car pulled away, and for the first time in 3 years, the house was silent in a way that didn't hurt. It was peaceful. Mine. The house was empty, not just physically, but emotionally. The walls no longer carried the muffled arguments, the passive-aggressive footsteps, the clinking of forks during tense dinners. The silence now was a different kind. Still. Clean. Mine. I stood in the living room on that first morning alone, barefoot on the hardwood floor, watching sunlight spill across the space where the kids' playmat used to be. The furniture was gone. The pictures had been stripped from the walls. Even the fridge magnets were missing, as if Megan needed to take every trace of her with her on the way out. It was just me now. Me. And a house I finally owned in both name and presence.
I walked slowly through every room. The living room, the hallway, the kitchen, which felt larger now without the clutter of family routines, the empty bedrooms, the now truly vacant guest room. I ended the loop in the dining room, the same one where they had seated me at the kids' table, where I had made my quiet stand in front of relatives and neighbors who would never forget it. I sat down and stared out the window for a long time. No one called, no one texted. Megan didn't send a final message. Jason didn't drop off a bitter voicemail. It was just over. Or at least I thought it was. Until the letter came. It arrived 4 days after they moved out, tucked inside a plain white envelope, no return address. I recognized Megan's handwriting immediately. The neat cursive, the loops too perfect, like she had taken her time trying to sound calm on paper. I held it for a moment before opening it. Some part of me still wanted it to be an apology.
Not a dramatic, tearful one, just a sliver of acknowledgement, a sentence, a line, something like, "I didn't realize how much I hurt you." Or maybe, "I'm sorry we never saw you for who you really are." But that wasn't what the letter said. It began like this: "Aaron, I don't know what kind of game you were playing this entire time, but congratulations, you won." I paused, my throat tightened. "You outmaneuvered us. You used your silence and your secrets to take something that wasn't yours. And now you sit in a house that still feels like ours, pretending you're better than the rest of us. I just hope it makes you happy. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go. We gave you food, shelter, a family, and you used that to position yourself above us. You never even said thank you. So I guess this is goodbye. Enjoy your kingdom, Megan." I read it twice, not because I needed clarification, but because I couldn't believe how twisted her version of the truth was. She'd rewritten the story in her mind, cast herself as the victim, and me as the manipulative villain. I guess that made it easier for her. Easier than admitting she'd built her comfort on my silence, that she had taken my time, my love, and my presence, and returned it with conditions. That she never once asked what I was building, because she never imagined I was capable of building anything at all. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it inside a drawer in the kitchen. Not because I planned to respond, but because I wanted to remember it. Keep a record of what denial looked like in ink. A few days later, another message arrived. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was an email from Jason. Just a single line: "You should have just asked if we needed help. We would have said yes." That was almost worse. Because the truth is, I had asked. I had asked for space, for appreciation, for recognition. Not with words, maybe, but with every quiet sacrifice. With every night I stayed up late folding their laundry. With every school form I filled out. With every forgotten birthday gift I remembered. I gave them help, they just never noticed. And when I finally helped in the biggest way possible, saving their home, they resented me for it. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't reply to anything. Because there was nothing left to say. Instead, I started something new. I converted the guest room into an office. It was the first real change I made to the house, a symbolic one. The place where I had once been stored away like extra furniture was now where I would build the next version of my life. I ordered a real desk, a white one with gold trim. I hung a dry erase calendar on the wall, placed bookshelves beneath the window, and laid down a soft cream rug underfoot. It didn't feel like a guest room anymore. It felt like headquarters. The business, Clear with Claire, was still growing. I launched a new product line, started working with a podcast producer, and opened a beta version of my Foundations for Freedom mentorship program, helping women like me learn how to build businesses from bedrooms, closets, and corners of borrowed homes. And every time I sat at that desk, in that sunlit room that used to carry the smell of sour milk and crushed Cheerios, I reminded myself, I am not who they said I was. I am not who they needed me to be. I am who I decided to become, in silence, with grace, and on my own terms. Still, some nights I thought about the kids. I missed them more than I could say, their little voices, their knock-knock jokes, their bedtime rituals. I had been their constant, and suddenly I was gone from their world without explanation. That broke me more than any letter Megan could write, so I sent each of them a package.
Not labeled, not preachy, just a soft stuffed animal, a short handwritten note that said, "I love you and I'll always be cheering for you," and a return address with my P.O. box, just in case. I didn't expect anything in return. But that wasn't why I sent it. Because even if their parents had rewritten the story, I still remembered the truth. And I wanted them, someday, to remember it too. I didn't expect fallout to come in waves, but it did. Not all at once, not like a bomb going off. More like slow-motion shrapnel. Emails from extended relatives, passive-aggressive comments under old Facebook posts, group chats that went silent the moment I opened them. Apparently, Megan had been telling her version of the story, a very curated one. She manipulated us. She tricked us into thinking she needed help. She bought the house just to kick us out.
According to her, I had played the long game, a scheming freeloader who'd wormed her way into their lives just to pull the rug out from under them. Never mind the 3 years of unpaid childcare, the birthday parties, the emergency room runs, the nights I rocked her daughter to sleep when Megan was too tired or too busy. None of that made it into the retelling. I only knew because Aunt Denise called me one morning. She sounded hesitant. "I didn't want to believe what Megan was saying," she said. "But I figured I should hear your side too." I told her everything, calmly, with facts. I even offered to forward the purchase documents if she wanted proof. Aunt Denise sighed. "I always knew you were the quiet one, but I never realized how much you were carrying." She didn't take sides, but she didn't hang up angry either. That counted for something? I thought the storm might stop there, but it didn't, because soon the online comments started. Not from strangers, but from people who knew pieces of our story. Friends of Megan's, parents from the kids' school, church acquaintances who remembered me as the sweet aunt who always helped out. The tone was always the same. "It's sad when money changes people. I hope she finds peace. Clearly something's broken inside her." Power trips like this never end well. At first, I ignored them. Then I made the mistake of responding once, just once, to a woman named Carly who had commented something like, "She pretended to love those kids and then kicked their family into the street." I replied, "I didn't pretend to love them. I raised them while their parents ignored the bills, and I didn't kick them out. I offered them a fair lease. They refused." Carly never responded, but the replies beneath my comment multiplied. Strangers weighing in on a story they hadn't lived, hadn't seen, hadn't felt the weight of. That's when I deleted the post, deleted the comment, deleted the account entirely. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't owe strangers my story. I already knew the truth, and the people who mattered would learn it, if they wanted to. Still, the fallout wasn't just online. The silence was louder. The absence of Megan in my phone. The absence of Jason in holiday photos from friends we used to share. The distance that formed between me and people I thought would reach out, and didn't. And underneath all of that, the missing voices of 2 small children I had once tucked in every night. I didn't know how much I would miss the chaos of them. Their toys underfoot, their sticky fingers, the way they said my name like it had music in it. I didn't regret my decision, but I did grieve what it cost me. There were nights I sat on the couch in the now quiet living room and scrolled through old videos on my phone. Birthday candles, messy pancake mornings, spontaneous dance parties in the hallway. My heart would ache in that tender, complicated way that only comes when you know you did the right thing, but it still hurts. Then, one afternoon, something arrived in the mail. A child's envelope, purple glitter on the corners. A slightly crumpled shape, like it had been hugged too tight before being dropped in the mailbox. It was from Lily, Megan's daughter, the one I had helped raise. Inside was a folded drawing, crayon lines and scribbles. Me, with a big smile and long hair, standing next to a heart. There was only one sentence, misspelled but perfect. "I miss you, Auntie Ewan." I sat down right there on the floor and let myself cry for the first time since they left. Not the silent tears I had learned to hide. Real, body-shaking, no-one's-watching kind of crying.
Because that tiny letter reminded me I hadn't been invisible, not to everyone, not to her. I wrote back. Nothing complicated. Just a card with stickers and a note. I miss you too, Lily. I think of you every day. You are loved. Always. I didn't expect a reply, but I sent it anyway. Because love, real love, doesn't stop just because someone else rewrites the narrative. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt. Not the house, that was already standing, but myself. I joined a local co-working space, made friends with other women who were building businesses quietly, just like I had. I told my story once, at a brunch event, and people listened like it mattered, like I mattered. And maybe for the first time, I believed it, that I didn't need validation from the people who overlooked me, that I didn't need to be liked to be worthy, that I didn't need permission to take up space, especially not in a house I bought with my own grit and grace.
One morning, I opened a new tab on my browser and began drafting something unexpected, a book outline. The guest room, what they didn't know while I was cleaning their kitchen. A memoir, a guide, a manifesto, not out of revenge, out of truth. Because I knew there were others like me, people who were always the helper, the placeholder, the extra chair pulled up at the end of the table, people who didn't realize they were allowed to be the main character. I wanted to tell them, you always were. And as I typed those words, sun pouring through the same window that once cast shadows over a shrinking version of myself, I smiled. Because the fallout didn't break me, it revealed me. They thought they knew what I was doing all those years. They saw the early mornings in pajamas, the nights folding laundry, the hours spent with a laptop open on the kitchen counter between babysitting shifts. But they didn't ask questions. They didn't care. They assumed I was wasting time. They didn't know I was building something. It started as a blog, a way to cope. Late-night posts about burnout, invisible labor, and what it meant to be the reliable one. I didn't use my real name at first, just initials. It felt safer that way. But the posts gained traction. Women messaged me. They cried in the comments. They said things like, I thought I was the only one. That's when I knew I wasn't just venting. I was creating a mirror. From the blog came the idea for a course. I'd learned everything on my own, how to build a site, how to write compelling content, how to manage time and stolen hours. I packaged it, called it Invisible to Independent. A bold name, maybe, but it was the truth. It wasn't perfect. The videos were filmed in the corner of the guest room, my voice hushed so the baby monitor wouldn't pick it up. I edited at midnight, uploaded lessons between diaper changes. There were typos, missed cues, but it was real, and it sold, not millions, not viral, but steady. Each sale was a breath of proof. I wasn't just a helper, I was a builder. Soon, I reinvested, hired a designer, improved the interface, brought in experts for mini-modules, therapists, coaches, financial planners. The second version launched stronger. Then came the podcast, The Quiet Hustle. I recorded it in the walk-in closet with a blanket over my head to muffle the sound. Every week, I spoke to people like me, women who were expected to give everything and want nothing, who built empires in the background while being told they were lucky just to be included. I didn't promote it heavily, and still, the audience grew because truth resonates, even whispered. By the time I bought the house, I had 4 income streams. All small, but together, they gave me freedom. More than Megan or Jason ever knew. I never rubbed it in. I didn't flash the numbers, but I tracked every cent. Every dollar was proof I wasn't the stereotype they'd written me into. Now, alone in the house, I had time. Time to scale, to polish, to rest. But more than anything, time to look around and say, I did this. That feeling, it's hard to describe. Not arrogance, not pride even, just relief. Like I'd spent years holding my breath and had finally exhaled. The business blossomed. I rebranded under my real name, put my face on the site, told my story honestly. No bitterness, just truth. The response was overwhelming. Women wrote in from all over. I left an abusive home and built something too. I never knew someone understood what it's like to be needed but never seen. Your story gave me the courage to start. And every time I read those messages, I remembered the guest room, the nights I cried into a pillow, wondering if this would ever be worth it. It was. It more than was. One message in particular stuck with me. It was from a woman named Valeria. She was 42, a single mom, living in her sister's basement, working 2 jobs, no time, no space. But something about my story lit a spark in her. She wrote, "You showed me that just because someone calls you less than doesn't mean you are. I don't want to die being someone's second option." I cried when I read it. Not because I felt responsible for her transformation, but because I understood it, word for word, feeling for feeling. That's when I started the scholarship fund. Quietly. No announcements, no PR, just a page on my website called The Other Chair, a place where women could apply for full access to my courses, mentoring, and tools. No questions, no shame. Funded from my own earnings, a percentage of every sale, and with every enrollment, every story, every launch. I felt it. The reclaiming of space, of self, of voice. I wasn't just living in the house now, I was filling it with meaning, with growth, with proof. One afternoon, I sat on the back steps with a mug of coffee and let the sun warm my face. The garden was overgrown, a project I kept putting off, but I liked the wildness, the untamed beauty. It reminded me of myself. That's when I heard the soft knock at the front door. Not urgent, just hesitant. I opened it slowly. It was Lily, alone. She looked older, even though only a few months had passed. Her backpack hung off one shoulder, her curls were a little longer, but her eyes, those wide, curious eyes, were the same. "Hi," she said quietly. I blinked. "Hi. My mom doesn't know I came," she added quickly. I missed you." My throat tightened. I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked through the door like she'd never left, heading straight for the kitchen, pulling out a chair like it still belonged to her. I sat across from her. She swung her feet under the table, nervous energy bubbling. "Mom says we're not supposed to talk to you, but I don't think that's fair." I smiled gently. "You don't have to pick sides, Lily. I'm still your aunt. That doesn't change." She nodded. "You were the only one who listened. You always listened." That broke me a little, because she remembered. We spent the afternoon painting rocks in the backyard, just like we used to. She told me about her new school, how her little brother was obsessed with dinosaurs now, how she missed pancakes on Saturdays. Before she left, I packed her a small bag of art supplies, her favorite markers, and a little journal. She hugged me tight. "You feel like home." And then she was gone again. But something had shifted. Not everything was broken. Some things could be rebuilt, brick by quiet brick. I didn't plan to renovate the final room. It had always been storage, a small space at the back of the house with a single window and peeling paint. When I first moved in, Megan used it as overflow. Old lamps, boxes of things she never unpacked, forgotten toys, junk drawer energy but in room form. But after everything, after they left, after I rebuilt, the room began to pull at me. I walked past it every day. Something about its silence felt unfinished, like it was waiting for a purpose. One Sunday morning, I opened the door, broom in hand. The light slanted in just right, illuminating dust particles in the air like floating ghosts of what had been. I stood there for a long time, imagining what it could be. Then I smiled. It wouldn't be an office. I had one. It wouldn't be a guest room. No more shrinking into corners. It would be a reflection, a sanctuary. I painted the walls a soft blue-gray, the color of quiet courage. I installed new windows, hung sheer curtains that caught the breeze just enough to breathe. I placed a single armchair in the center, beside a round wooden table. On the table, a candle, a stack of journals, and a photograph of me and Lily, mid-laugh, holding paintbrushes. This wasn't a workspace. This was a room for remembering, for sitting still, for processing. I called it the listening room. Because for so many years, no one listened to me. Not truly. Not when I cried in silence. Not when I showed up every day, giving everything, asking for nothing. And now, I listen to myself, to the girl I used to be. The one who thought being nice meant staying small. The one who equated love with usefulness. The one who thought silence kept the peace. She lived in me still, but I no longer let her lead. And then something happened. Lily came back, not just once, but every other weekend. It started with short visits, painting, reading, baking muffins she never actually ate. She'd sneak over with her dad, who dropped her off quietly, never coming inside. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Her presence said everything. Megan never approved, I'm sure. But she didn't stop it either. I didn't ask for permission. Love, real love, didn't need to ask for access. It just showed up. One afternoon, Lily wandered into the listening room while I was writing. She ran her fingers along the shelf of journals. Are these all yours? I nodded. Everyone. She picked one up, flipped through the pages. You write a lot. It helps me understand what I feel. She sat cross-legged on the rug, thoughtful. Do you write about Mom? Sometimes. Do you hate her? The question caught me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized what she was truly asking. Do I have permission to love you both? No, I said. I don't hate your mom. I just needed to choose myself. Sometimes choosing yourself makes other people uncomfortable. She nodded like she understood more than a child should. Then she opened her own small notebook, the one I had given her, and began to write. In silence, we filled the room with our words. It became our ritual. The room no one used became the room we both needed. And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the past had been rewritten, but because I had reclaimed the pen. I wrote my story, and I told it. My podcast grew into a book deal. The memoir I had drafted became a bestseller in niche circles, book clubs, women's groups, quiet revolutions in quiet homes, and one day, months later, I stood at a bookstore event, holding a microphone in front of 100 people who had come to hear me speak. Me. The one who used to eat Thanksgiving dinner at the kids' table. The one who folded clothes and dreamed quietly behind closed doors. The one who owned the house but was still treated like furniture. And I told them what I now knew to be true. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be seen to be building something that matters. And you never, ever owe people your silence just to keep them comfortable. People cried, people stood, people bought books not because I was famous, but because I was honest. And that's what stayed with them. When I walked back into my home that night, the porch light was on. The house, my house, smelled like lavender and lemon and something clean. Something lived in. Lily was asleep in the guest room, no longer a cage, but a space I had transformed for her. Painted purple with stars on the ceiling and a shelf of her favorite books. She had a home here. She always would. I walked past the office, past the kitchen, and stood once more in the listening room. I lit the candle, and I sat. Not as someone cast out, not as someone who needed to prove her worth, but as a woman who had arrived. Fully, finally, home. Before I end this story, if it moved you in any way, don't forget to like the video, comment below where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. You have no idea how much it helps. Thank you for listening. And never forget, just because they gave you the guest room, doesn't mean you didn't own the house all along.